Madam Clerk?
Yes. Calling the roll, Mr. Brady?
Present.
Mr. Germana?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Connolly? We have a quorum.
Very much. We're going to begin today with our work session. Thank you for coming. We're going to begin with item number 3, which is a presentation we've been looking forward to as our council regarding the Cuyahoga County real estate portfolio. And we have, I believe, somebody from Allegro here.
Actually, if with your permission, I'll introduce Damon, if that's all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Bonnie Teowen, Public Works Director. Thank you. We too have been looking forward to this presentation. In September, we approved the contract for Allegro to do a in-depth study of all of our properties, lease as well as own. And Allegro worked diligently for the 90 days. That was their deadline to come up with a recommendation as far as what we do with all of our properties. So here today is Damon Tassoff from Allegro Realty to present his findings.
Thank you very much, Director, and welcome to our meeting.
Thank you for having me. So Bonnie told me I was very lucky to be presenting first because I was going to be the first one to use the styrofoam cup with water here, but I brought my own bottle. Well, again, thank you for having me here today. I just want to say that on behalf of myself, my team at Allegro, and the rest of the sub-consultants that worked on this project with us, we really enjoyed it both from a professional perspective and a civic perspective. We're really happy with the results, and we look forward to walking you through our process and those results here today. I understand that we have a tight schedule. I have 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to work through with you 90 days worth of work in 20 slides, which gives me about 1 minute a slide. I think overall, we'd like to talk with you a little bit about the background and give you some context into the whole project, talk with you about phase 1 of our work, which was the current state assessment, phase 2, which was the future state assessment, phase 3, the strategy and action plan, and then just go through with you the executive summary and the action plan, the next steps moving forward. It helps to succinctly summarize, the results of the recommended plan. A little bit of background on the project. Bonnie mentioned we worked for 90 days, brought together a team of expert professionals from 6 different firms: Allegro, Vocon, G. Stevens, Integrated Engineering Consultants, Graylick, Grubb & Ellis. In all, we had over 20 people working on this deliverable over the 90 days. I'm really happy with the ground we covered. Over 60 properties, 7 million square feet, almost every square foot toured. We interviewed over 50 people, had a number of working sessions with county staff, and made sure that we developed consensus building all along the way so that ultimately we arrived at a place that made sense for all of the different departments within county government. It's really important to point out here that we didn't only look at real estate assets, but we also looked at the organization that supports those real estate assets so that moving forward, we work strategically to make the smart types of decisions that we didn't make historically. So why don't we move forward and talk a little bit about the phase 1 current state assessment. And ultimately here what we looked at was 8 key threads of information. And really, to make strategic decisions related to your real estate, you have to have a number of different data points readily available at your fingertips. And most directors of real estate have this information on their desk or within their computer. And we didn't really have that all consolidated in one place. So for us to move forward and make strategic decisions based on facts and not gut feelings, we had to make sure that we had it all correctly documented. And so we looked at utilization, how well our people were operating within each of our facilities, how vacant some of our facilities were. We toured, we conducted interviews, we surveyed different departments. We also developed financial models for each property. So over 60 properties had its own financial model. We looked at the hold costs over a 10, 20-year period so that we understood if we did nothing, this is what it's going to cost the county, this is what it's going to cost the county taxpayer. We developed brokers' opinions of value. So we were able to ascertain if the leases that we had signed, that we had entered into, if they were above or below market. We looked at property valuations for owned properties. We also took a look at the mechanicals of each of our own facilities. We looked at existing conditions of our own facilities just to help us understand in what shape some of our own properties were in. We also reviewed and abstracted all of the leases within the county portfolio. We looked at the parking structures, and we also conducted some interviews of county staff to help us understand 4 key threads that we wanted to pay attention to when looking at the organization. What's our people? What's our process? What's the technology that we're deploying across the portfolio to help us better manage our real estate? And what benchmarks are we using to measure performance? Phase 2 component of our work really focused on the future state assessment. So looking forward, what does that real estate portfolio need to look like? We looked at each of the different departments within county government, tried to understand their strategic planning, what their operational requirements were moving forward. We paid special attention to public access and how the clients of the county, the different county departments needed to access services. We looked at opportunities to share space across the different departments within county government. A good example of this would be conference rooms, training rooms. How can we better deploy that across the entire portfolio? We paid special attention to adjacencies, which departments needed to be located next to other departments. And we also deployed uniform space standards. So when we were projecting future space requirements, our team from VOCON made some certain assumptions about what the appropriate size for offices were, what the appropriate size of cubes were. Outside of the programming requirements, we also took the opportunity to validate some of our work with other counties across the United States. We reached out to 20 counties to interview them and try to understand how they were using people, process, technology, and what benchmarks they were using within their organization to manage the county's real estate assets. So it was interesting through those discussions. I think a lot of counties across America today are realizing that real estate is an opportunity to not only save costs, but increase efficiencies moving forward. So every county government is operating under an environment where there's scarce resources, there's less money, and more needs to be done. So they're really turning to real estate as a way to maybe increase savings and reach the constituents in a better format. I would like to think that, similar to the ethics work that we've done, Cuyahoga County can position itself moving forward as the benchmark for how county governments strategically manage their real estate resources and be used as a case study across the country. And we'll talk a little bit about that here later on as we work through some of the recommended benchmarks. All right, so phase 3 was essentially bridging our current state and our future state. What's the strategy and what's the action plan going to look like to get us there? Again, as I mentioned before, we looked at the organization and then we looked at the real estate portfolio. Everyone likes to talk about the real estate portfolio, but the organization itself is critically important. So I'll just move through these relatively quickly. When we look at people, what we try to do is leverage our expertise with other corporate real estate departments across the country and our interviews with other counties to ultimately arrive at some of these recommendations, we think that moving forward, it makes a lot of sense to develop a real estate committee that reviews and approves requested moves across the county portfolio, but it also gives Bonnie and her team the opportunity to impart real estate strategy across the enterprise, so everyone knows, what the county is trying to do with their real estate to be more cost conscious and be more smart about real estate decision making. The second bullet point, I think, is fairly straightforward, but continue to leverage outside real estate expertise to augment internal staff resources. And you look at all different counties across America. Some counties completely leverage outside real estate resources, others the other end of the spectrum. The majority of them, we found, typically tend to gravitate towards outside real estate services on large-scale projects where the expertise is really needed. So process, a lot of bullet points here on this slide. I think that some of the most important ones, a full-on inventory of all county-owned property would be something that the county should really look into moving forward. We paid special attention to 60 properties that were outlined within the RFP that we responded to. We ultimately added a couple additional properties to that just because we realized we had staff in those buildings and they made sense to take a good look at. But there's a lot of property that is currently titled under Cuyahoga County commissioners, and it really would make sense for there to be one central archive for all of this, that we would know where this property is sitting and who's using it, and if there are economic development related opportunities for us moving forward with some of this property. Looking at other counties across America, we think that consolidating real estate decision-making is an opportunity to evaluate here. We have hospitals, libraries, a number of county agencies. It would make sense for there to be one central decision-making group that strategically looks at all of the real estate assets that is titled underneath the Cuyahoga County. So, for example, if there's a board that needs space, if they called Public Works could say, you need space in Westlake? Well, we just so happen to have another piece of real estate that we own. There's already 3,000 square feet vacant inside of it. Could you use this piece rather than go out and lease a new piece of property? So we think that consolidating real estate decision-making gives us that opportunity to save money. Developing a capital and deferred maintenance plan, we think, is also really critical. What we see historically is that it is very easy to cut budgets related to real estate facilities and capital expenditures. It's much easier to cut those expenses than it is to cut programs and people. And as a steward of taxpayer assets, we have to pay special attention to the deferred maintenance that stacks up on some of these buildings. The courthouse, the Justice Center, all have had their budgets cut, and ultimately that creates a bigger problem down the road. So it's something to look into. Other counties across America have set up independent authorities where their budget process is fixed. They don't have to campaign for funding to replace HVAC systems, to upgrade elevators, and the facilities are always in A+ condition. A few other critical items here. We think it's really important to be able to track all real estate costs through Public Works. So a lot of those costs right now are running through Public Works. However, a couple of the departments pay their utilities separately. They pay facility repairs through their line item budgets. So it's very hard to accurately understand how much this building is costing us. So as part of our exercise, we need to go to a number of different places across county government to create a projected pro forma for each building. A director of real estate that is responsible for a portfolio of this size should be able to pull up their laptop and understand all of the expenses that are associated with a given building at any moment in time. Right now, we're flying a little bit blind in that regard. Standardizing furniture systems also would be something that we think we need to look at moving forward. technology, the last, or the third thread here, deploying some type of portfolio management software system would be critically important to the facility management team and the rest of the real estate team. You know, these types of systems are used across corporations pretty regularly. Helps them manage their CAD files, lease administration, facility management costs. So I know that there have been some previous discussions about this historically in the past. I know I think they're beginning to come back again. We think it's a good idea. So. Regarding benchmarks are really important when managing corporate real estate portfolios. It's a way to measure improvement, drive year-over-year performance, and it really helps to create a decision-making framework, which is something that we have not had, it looks like, in the past. And you know, if we're trying to figure out the way to get the best bang for our buck, benchmarks help us. How do we define that bang? So in our work with the county, what we've tried to develop is this concept of a triple bottom line. It's impact to the Cuyahoga County employees, financial perspective, impact to the community, and then impact to the environment. So here on slide 10, what we've tried to do is break out a number of these proposed benchmarks. You know, the first column, impact to Cuyahoga County, this is where I would say traditional real estate decision-making is evaluated. What's my cost per square foot? What's my square foot per employee? What's my utility cost per square foot? What is my image and visibility to the street, public access, etc. We control the county. When I say we, the county spends a lot of money every year on real estate. So saying that, let's just say that we can meet all of these hurdles in the first column. If we can meet our internal hurdles, can we also have an impact in the community? So, for example, are there ways that perhaps we can use our spend to be an economic development engine? Can we create change in some of our blighted neighborhoods? So assuming we can meet our goals in the first column, can we also meet our goals in the second column? We think it's very possible. And then we'll also pay attention to the third column, which is being environmentally conscious, beginning to implement green standards across our portfolio. Over time, that we will realize savings in utilities and operating costs. So using a triple bottom line framework like this would really set us apart when you look at other counties, how they're making real estate decisions. Quite honestly, it would probably also, you would position yourself well when you compare yourselves to other corporations and how they manage their real estate portfolios. All right, so moving into the real estate asset piece, it's one of the hardest things about the project is succinctly describing all of the moving parts to people. We have a 7 million square feet portfolio. There's a lot of moving pieces and moving departments to get us to the recommended strategy. I think if there were 5 key storylines, what we've tried to do is capture them here so that people could understand what at the end of the day is the basis of our recommendation. So it's the disposition of unneeded assets, focusing on creating some space around the Justice Center and the buildings that surround the Justice Center, realigning the Health and Human Services footprint, creating a consolidated admin complex, and then also creating some type of consolidated storage complex where we can pull in all these different storage facilities that we have. This would also be the ideal time to talk about assumptions. So our plan is based on a number of assumptions. They all rely on static information that could be changing now, could change tomorrow. It's important to point out that our financial models alone, we have north of 60 of them. In each model, there's 15 different variables. And so what we have is what we call cascading variables. One variable impacts the other variable, and what we've tried to do to prevent any going too far out on a limb, I guess you could say, is we strive to make very conservative assumptions and projections and use professional expertise. So slide 12, what we did was develop a qualitative framework for decision making related to which assets we keep, which assets we want to get rid of, based on team expertise, county feedback, findings from phase 1 and phase 2. The framework was based on 3 key threads: programming, how well are programming requirements met in the current building; financial impact, are there financial savings or gains that could be realized by moving; and then portfolio leverage or / special use, could we move these people elsewhere within the portfolio? 3 key threads that we paid attention to. Based on those 3 threads, we categorize the buildings as invest, divest, or hold. So a property that we chose to invest in programmatically, financially, and strategically made sense to keep. The divest obviously was the exact opposite. If you were categorized as a hold, it was because you fell in between the 2. And why don't we walk through 3 examples of this so everyone can understand a little bit of our methodology. So the Justice Center was scored as a property we should continue to invest in. It meets our programming requirements very well. There are no savings or financial gains that could be realized by moving to a different facility. And quite honestly, it can't be consolidated elsewhere within the portfolio. We don't have jails anywhere else. We don't have that many courtrooms anywhere else. The Justice Center is an asset that is very strategic to the county. The admin building, on the other hand, was scored as a divest. It really doesn't meet programming requirements. So we've had a chance to meet with some of you. We've toured your space. Everyone is sitting on top of each other. They're creating offices to fit everyone in. The departments are not adjacent to each other, and it's not a building that is conducive to the new county government. So programmatically, it's not really meeting requirements very well. There are savings, there are financial gains that could be realized by moving those operations. And quite honestly, the operations that are being conducted within that building could be moved elsewhere within the portfolio or to other space within the CBD. Back office space, it's pretty typical. A property that falls in between invest and divest would be the Marion building. Is everyone familiar with the Marion building? It's on, okay. So that's a really unique building for a lot of reasons, but it meets programming requirements very well. There's a brand new lab that was built out in the bottom of the space. It's mostly probation clients that come to use the space. So it's meeting those requirements. Savings or gains could be realized by moving because there is a lot of deferred maintenance on this facility. The HVAC heating systems are not in good shape at all. To replace those systems, you would have to take out a lot of the improvements that you just put in. The elevator systems are not good at all, and we have serious deferred maintenance with the brickwork at the top of the building. So there's a lot of large dollar ticket items that need to happen at that building. Unfortunately, given the clients that are served there, we can't move them elsewhere within the portfolio. So you have to pay special attention to who's using the facilities and where we could fit them. So the Marion building is a unique situation right now. I think it makes sense for the county to get out of it. We just haven't found a reliever building for them to move to at this point in time. So slide 14 outlines the buildings that we think make sense to hold, to continue to invest in. 22 of the 66 properties that we looked at are contained on this slide. We think that there are additional savings that could be generated by restructuring the leases that are at the neighborhood family service centers. We also think that there are increased savings opportunities by forging a relationship with the Cleveland School District and utilizing some of their vacant school buildings for storage facilities. Slide 15 is our buildings that have been categorized as hold properties. We talked a little bit about Marion Building already. Courthouse Square is a similar situation. Something to look at moving forward into the future here is going to be the garages and our maintenance yards. There are definitely consolidation opportunities there. I think that we generally made the decision that it was hard to forecast what programming requirements were going to be at those facilities due to unknown situations related to suburban and county working arrangements and what work might come to the county and may not come to the county. So if there is an opportunity to regionalize and move some of municipal services to the county to provide, we might need bigger yards and bigger maintenance garages. And so over the next 2 or 3 years, we think that's something to look at. And once we have a better idea of what that scope looks like, we can start making decisions about those real estate assets. Slide 16 talks or lists the properties that we have chosen to extricate ourselves from. What we've tried to do is identify here each building and the percentage of the overall savings. So we're projecting $91 million in net present value over 10 years. 23% of that is derived from getting out of the Ameritrust building, 30% from the administration building here. And you can see the breakout across the rest of the portfolio. Slide 17 is essentially our executive summary. The recommended plan that we've put in place ultimately results in a reduction in the square footage of our portfolio of 18, almost 19%. 10-year present value savings of $56 million to the taxpayer. And over 20 years, which is an extremely long window to be modeling out, honestly, is $84 million. We talked a little bit about cascading assumptions. There is a certain margin of error with all of this, obviously, but there are definite savings to be realized if the county were to move forward and begin implementing this plan. This whole strategy is based on a consolidated administrative complex. And so that's really the next step for the county to begin thinking about is the acquisition of that site. We have a number of leased facilities that we would be moving people out of into that location. And all of those leased facilities have staggered expirations. So it's going to be really critical for us to begin moving forward so that we can meet those lease expirations because they're all rolling within the next 2 to 3 years, and we might need to, expedite our procurement process.
Thank you very much. We have questions at this point. To my right, Mr. Brady, and then Mr. Schron. Thank you. You were finished, right?
I am finished. Hopefully that was 20
minutes.
Sure.
This is just very quickly. The real estate committee on page 6, has that been established yet?
I don't believe so, no. Bonnie would be the person to talk to about that. But
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The divest, I don't see any place where we're actually valuing if this asset was the right time to sell because it's a valuable property, and that might mean crossing over into the invest category or even to the hold category if the property happens to be located in the right spot commercially. Was that considered?
the pricing of assets at disposition?
If a particular property happening, as we all know about land, is location, location, location.
Right.
If one of our properties happen to be in the right location, even though you've cataloged it as hold or invest, but yet there was an interested buyer in it. Have we looked at the possibility of commercialization because the time might be right to sell a property that we thought could hold or invest in?
Yeah, we've valued all of the properties, and we've put prices on all of those properties. It's part of some of the other work that Bonnie has, and we could probably show that to you in under executive session.
Okay, there might be, yeah, I understand that there's a sensitive nature as to whether there's a potential buyer or there's ever been any interest in some properties that might have been listed as an invest, but yet it's in a commercial corridor that we might say, well, we're going to bite the bullet and get rid of it.
Right. Well, I think it always makes sense to entertain those opportunities. We've tried to incorporate all of the known information at the given time into our study. So if there was an interested buyer that we knew about, we at least looked into that. And if there's a specific building that you want to talk about, we could.
I don't. I just hope you had looked in.
No, we did, and
from that concept that.
Yes, we did, and I think it's a good point that you raise. We should always be flexible in looking at those types of opportunities. There was a county that we interviewed, for example, that decided to get out of a building solely because the neighborhood around it had turned the corner, and they felt like they needed to get out of the way and let economic development take place. So,
Executive, did you have a
just briefly?
comment?
I had asked the same question, and there's a building. I think, and I could be specific about it. I don't think it gives anything too much away, but Courthouse Square, I think, is on the hold list, isn't it?
it is on the hold list.
But even if it was on, there has been interest in the past, let's say, in Courthouse Square. There was going to be a hotel project there at one point in time. Then the hotel project died. You probably remember when that whole area was fenced off for about 3 years at one point in time when there was going to be a hotel project. Then when financing went away, that project went away. One of the things, and the RFP hasn't gone out yet, but that was one of the questions, because the next step, as I think, maybe I missed it, but the next step would be do an RFP for these properties. One of the things that I had asked to Damon was that we don't know what the market's response is going to be until we ask the market, what you're interested in. And if we said artificially we're only interested in these 22 buildings are a priority for us to divest ourselves of, we would be depriving ourselves of options that could be out there. So we haven't gone through the way that the RFP will be drafted, but I'd like to see what's out there, because I think there's buildings at least that are on the hold list that if you got an offer, it might make sense to do it. Some of the ones that are on the invest list, I think, are harder under any circumstances to see us getting rid of, just because of the nature of the buildings. I mean, you're not going to, the Justice Center and the old courthouse, I mean, these are buildings we're always going to own. I think there's others that should just see what the market, what's the market interest on it, and not foreclose it. So we've discussed that issue.
Yeah, that's all I was going to, that same point,
Yep.
that the divest should not be limited to just those if there's other folks interested. And then my only other follow-on question was, we identified 66 properties. You alluded to that represents a portion of our portfolio. What portion is it of our portfolio as a percentage of total property, as to usage, square foot, condition, as to whether it's a conditionable property? I mean, have we thought about, I'm sure you have, but like the condition as to, is it up to date for IT, HVAC, modernization? I mean, of this chunk that you said has not been looked at, what does it represent? Is this 80-20 that we've already looked at, or is this?
Well, we've paid special attention to the assets the county government is operating out of. So, we have just tracts of land because of easements and right-of-ways and roads. We have properties that the hospital has given back to us that sit vacant. So it's, I don't think that there's a lot of monetary value in some of these buildings, but.
Gotcha. So we are probably at 90% or plus, I would think, of our asset value?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is good to identify all of your.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman
Thank you.
Strawn. We have another question. I think Councilman Miller, do you have a question?
Madam President, one question got answered, but I have one. In your 22, 22, and 22 recommendation list, do these recommendations come out of considering just the impact on Cuyahoga County, or did you also factor in the other two items on your benchmark plan, which is the impact on the community and the impact on the environment? And if it's the latter, to what extent did those two elements play into the set of recommendations?
Right. I would say that we didn't look too much at the third column. I think that's something that we're going to need to look at moving forward when we make new real estate decisions and we invest in our buildings. On the second thread, impact to the community, you know, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the neighborhood family service centers and their locations. You know, we did talk about that internally. We didn't make decisions based on that, but it was something that we discussed.
Thank you. Councilman Greenspan?
Thank you. In all your analysis, obviously there's some functions, such as some public works, you know, maintenance yards and the medical examiner, where those facilities are to a specific use. But general administrative services of the county, if they were all to be consolidated into one location, have you done an analysis based on your square footage and your office space and your cubicle size? What would a single administrative function facility look like?
Right. We think that from a high level, we would need about 230,000 usable square feet. And that is subject to change depending on if we, you know, are able to have some discussions with other county agencies and boards and if they want to co-locate within this consolidated admin complex. But for county operations, as we stand today, roughly 230,000 usable square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, we're tight on time. Does anybody else have questions?
Madam Chair, there was one other thing,
Yes.
I'll just be very brief, but I just wanted the council to be aware, we are starting to initiate conversations with other governmental entities, some of which are funded by the county but are not under our direct control, and some of which we've had discussions, for instance, with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. I had a discussion with Mayor Jackson the other day about whether or not it would make sense if we had a large governmental center, if there would be other public or quasi-public entities that it would make sense to co-locate with us. Now, if we wanted to wait for all of those entities to reach the same decision, we might be waiting for a long time. So we're going to go ahead and proceed, but I just want the council to know, and the council may have suggestions about, it could even be nonprofits that it just makes sense that they would want it because they interact with us so much as a county government, that would make sense to be in the same building if we ended up in a building that had other space beyond the 250,000 square foot that we used. And I just want the council to know, if you have suggestions about that, let us know, because I'm trying to get those decisions on their radar screens as soon as possible, because they're signing leases, they're making decisions long term, and before they invest in a property, we want them to know that this option is out there for them.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your
Thank
work.
you.
It's been really informative, and we're going to move on, just because we're short on time, to Mr. Jeff Applebaum and an update of the Medical Mart.
You're right. Boy, it's good. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
I'll make this quick because I must. Actually, this is a fairly straightforward review today. Things are going very well on the project, so I think I can do this quickly and run through this in maybe literally in 10 minutes. So let me see if I can do that. So the first slide here, the project summary, nothing has changed, and so I don't need to go through that. Let me start here with the design update very quickly. I'll move through these slides. We received our final building permit issued by the city in October. We now have all of our final design approvals. This is a fast-track project, which means that we are designing while we're building. That's the nature of this type of project. The only outstanding approval which is yet required from the city is for our exterior signage. We don't think we're going to have any issues getting that, and then we'll be done with all the approvals. We are still going through some final design decisions. As you recall, We had situations where we had alternates where, depending on our pricing, we could upgrade or do other things. Right now, we're working through lighting and interior alternates, and it's our hope that at the next time that I present to you, I'm actually going to show you the final decisions that were made for the interiors, which should be exciting to actually see what a lot of this will ultimately look like, and you'll be very pleased and delighted by the final selections, I think, that are made. Construction update. We are still on schedule for an October 31st, 2013 substantial completion. We're actually exploring the opportunity to maybe even finish a little earlier if there's some events which we're thinking of that may be advantageous for us to do that. More about that later. I want to say one thing, and I don't think that our whole team necessarily this is understood. This is remarkable that we are on time, and I'm going to tell you why it's remarkable. The wettest year on record prior to 2011 was 53.83 inches of rain in Cleveland. It was 1990. It was, I refer to it as the great year for construction lawyers, because we all had claims based on delays because sites were so wet and there were so many problems. Rain and wet conditions delay construction. In 2011, we blew beyond that record. We were at 65.32 inches. We were 20% higher than the highest rainfall ever experienced. Despite all that rain, all that flooding, our project, as you know, is an exposed site. It was completely exposed during these months. We did not miss a beat. We had issues and challenges, but we maintained the schedule and overcame the wettest year by far in history. So it's really, we need to commend our construction team and our group that worked around these issues. It's really quite a remarkable achievement. In terms of expenditures, through the end of last year, the total amount that we have paid for all aspects of the construction project through MMPI, but then down to our design build team, to our other consultants, to architects and engineers, $145.7 million. Of that, 123.5 represents bricks and sticks in place. The rest of that represents design, consulting, and other related costs, including MMPI's construction fee. But what that basically tells you is the amount of money that we're expending monthly. In September, that should say December, it was $13.6 million. The project is now 35% complete. We're 35% done based on billings to date for work in place and stored materials. So that's how fast we're moving through the project. Of the 54 bid packages under Turner, 53 have now been submitted for approval. So we're just about done selecting all the prime contractors. There are still some subcontractors and others that are being placed, but we're basically through that selection process, and we're still on schedule to receive LEED Silver certification for the project. I'm now going to take you pictorially through what's really going on, because you can't see this anymore from tall buildings because it's now enclosed. So I'm going to start with the area, and this is a recent aerial photograph. I'm going to start very quickly with the area which is north of Lakeside. This is the ballroom area, Convention Center north of Lakeside. I have a listing there on the slide of the things that we've accomplished, but the structure is complete. The slab on metal pan deck is complete. That's why it's now completely enclosed. You can't see all the activity going on underneath. We're involved with the waterproofing installation. Pretty soon you'll have the material that goes on top of the waterproofing that detects leaks. The loading dock, concrete apron walls are 60% complete. MEP rough-in continues. Really quite a bit of work is going on there. Just to give you a view very quickly, here you see an image, which is the ballroom. So this is what's going on underneath that you can't see now. Just a lot of work going on in the ballroom area that you see right there in that picture. Here you see the meeting rooms, ballroom level, the work in that area, all enclosed. The back of the house in the ballroom, you see in this area, massive conduit being put in, to support activities. The loading dock apron, just a lot of work that you don't see underground. When you look at the site, like I do for my high building, you see a few trailers. There are twice as many trailers now that you don't even see because they're in enclosed areas. You don't even see them on the site anymore. With respect to this area, the Convention Center south of Lakeside, there you see waterproofing. Most of the activity right now is around the East Mall Drive area and the west area, those two areas on either side. Work is about to commence very significantly in the middle. To show you pictorially,
Here you see the West Concourse, which is enclosed now with work going on underneath it. These photographs, which are a few weeks old, if you look right now, it's already far beyond that. Here you see the loading dock area beneath that concourse. On the East Concourse, you see the enclosure of the East Concourse, which is up against the public auditorium. This is an interesting fact. So that drive on top, if you look at that concourse, I'm going to go back a slide. On top of that concourse is the drive that goes along public auditorium. That drive has to be completed before the Rock Hall event in April. So that drive will be completed. It will be ready to go, and we actually intend to start the process of turning this over. We're going to turn that drive over to the city in March of this year. We have a lot of work involved in terms of how that's going to happen, but that will be turned over, and we'll be done with that area on top. We'll be working down below, but we'll be done with that area on top. And this is an example of work. This is just a random picture underneath that East Concourse where you see mechanical and other work going on there. Another really neat thing which is going to start in that area, early on we talked about tree columns. Well, you're going to see in a very short amount of time the first tree columns being delivered to the site. And these are these massive columns that will hold up the roof with the tree limbs going out to hold up support. Here you see they're being fabricated off-site right now. Here's an example of a tree column. Here's a couple more tree columns. And you're going to see these start to be erected in the southwest corner of where the halls are, the exhibit halls. You'll see them go north, and then you'll see them come back south and go up north and come back south. That will be the method of installing these things. They'll be framed, and you'll see them connected up on top. And then finally, you'll see the taller ones right against Lakeside. So you're going to see the steel actually start to come out on the main part of the site where the convention halls are. Finally, the medical mart. You've all seen, this is the most obvious steel going up. Steel erection is probably 90% done. You see that the metal decking's down, you're seeing the floor, you're seeing the concrete being poured as all this work is being done. This is a few weeks ago, but already this picture's out of date because what you see now, if you look there, you saw a few weeks ago this major truss that they were putting down on the ground here that I'm showing you now. That truss has now been erected, so as you're traveling east to west, you can now see that major truss on the side of the medical mart as that work continues very quickly. And finally, we are completing work in the public auditorium, restoration work, and we're basically just about complete with the West 3rd Bridge construction that I'll talk about in a minute. At the very bottom here, that driveway will be done by the last week of February. So let's talk about, and I think it says Friday, February is what that was supposed to say there, risk management list. We really have two elements. We've resolved everything else. We have a lot of things below the radar, but things I'm not going to bore you with because they're small issues. The St. Clair crack, just for an update on that, all the repairs, temporary repairs have been made. They were completed November 11th. As you know, St. Clair is reopened. Turner and the city are still in discussions on the scope of the final repair. There may be some issues there, but the point is no cost to the county. We're not involved in that. We will not be involved directly in that dispute. The driveway replacement between West 3rd Street and the loading dock, the work commenced in November. It's going to be completed February 28th. Probable cost will be $1.6 million. At this point in time, MMPI has funded that out of their own contingency while they've reserved rights with respect to the county. There's no current demand that we do anything about that cost. That work has gone well. The same thing I told you about budget the last time we met holds true. We are completely on budget. We have still not made any significant, in fact, any expenditure out of our contingency, and we are holding exactly where we should be. Everything is just spot on financially from the county's perspective on the project, both with respect to time and money. Contracting and staffing, I've showed you this timeline before. Here's just a blow-up of what's going on month to month. Last month, there were approximately 328 people on the project per day. If you look at the site right now, you won't see that many people because they're all underground and closed. Today, by way of example, there's about 388 people on that project. In February, excuse me, by the end of the month, starting February, there'll be about 412 people. So we're ramping up from about 328 to 412, and we're at 388 right now. Less than we had predicted because, as I've told you several times, we had calculated additional manpower to take care of contingency issues, which haven't occurred. So the good news is we're expending somewhat less manpower because the contingent problems that we predicted would occur have not. Some of that will come up later, but we're doing very well from a manpower point of view. Safety, and I want to emphasize this, we still, every month I've shown you this, one accident resulting in lost time. An extraordinarily safe project, well-managed project, no significant issues with respect to safety. Economic inclusion, these numbers have not changed by more than 1% in the last several months that I've presented it. SBE at 32%. There's 138 SBE contractors. 39 have been hired by their primes for the first time. 48% county residency versus the 40% goal, 21% city residency. Those are the cumulative workforce statistics, 372,000 total man hours. Approximately 21% of those have been expended by minority workers, 5% female workers, 21%, as I say, City of Cleveland residents, 48% Cuyahoga County residents. A quick business update, because I don't have time. I'm going to get this done by 5 o'clock, by the way. Number one, we are at 35 letters of intent or contracts for the use of the meetings or conventions. Positively Cleveland says that that scope that we now have out there, they've estimated the economic impact of those shows that we are have either under letter of intent or under first phase of contract at $82 million. That's going to grow. The last time we talked about this, we indicated that MMPI was going to put out 35 leases initially for their phase 1 and phase 2 LOI holders. Since that time that we talked in November, they now have 8 leases that have been signed. All the rest are in negotiation, so that is going just according to plan. The advisory committee that the county executive assembled, the first meeting date was December 16, 2011. It was a very effective meeting, I thought. A lot of good dialogue with critical players. The next meeting is scheduled for February 29, 2012. And at the next time that we present to you, we'll have MMPI present an update of what's much more specific about their plan. As the spring rolls on, we're going to be able to get much more specific about leases, shows, and what's going on there. Finally, the Group Plan Commission, a quick update on that. The last time I was here, I told you about, and Tony Coyne was here, we talked about a possible 3-way split of these initial costs that we'd have to incur to preserve the status quo of up to $200,000 a party as between the county, the city, and MMPI. Recall this was for this initial design work to present options that then the Group Plan Commission would take, and they'd move on from that step. We had a budget for that, by the way. We basically budgeted, we talked to the parties, and it looked like that initial design safe budget was $507,000. We did recognize that there was going to be some very early physical work. We have to put some sleeves and conduit in just to preserve the status quo. That was not necessarily part of this plan, because we talked about design, but the value of that was about $82,000. I will give you an update on this as we've walked through and managed this process. The design component of that, $507,000, we're revising that to $243,000. We've actually done the first phase of this sort of on faith, and we had dramatic savings in the first phase. So we've done about $130,000 of this effort because the teams had to go ahead and get started kind of on faith that this would be worked out. There's $110,000 of the second part of design left, but that's $243 versus $507. One of the issues that we are contemplating is with that kind of savings, we think that it might be appropriate to split this initial phase of physical work, the sleeves and the conduit, because that really has to be done fast. It would still mean that this entire effort would take about $320,000 versus $600,000 if it was a 3-way split. So we're going to explore that to see if there's an interest in doing it that way. The reason it's important is because that work really has to be implemented pretty quickly. There is a proposed funding agreement that I've prepared, a 3-way agreement that will be looked at for comment to see whether it's something that we would then take back. But as I say, that sleeve and conduit work, we really have to move forward one way or the other because we have to authorize Turner to start that work, put it in the documents by March 1. So that component, it's not a big dollar amount, but it's important to move the process forward. And I'm done.
Great, record time. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And quick questions from Mr. Sharon?
Yeah, just a quick question in regards to your sleeve and conduit work that you talked about and seeing the Allegro proposal that says divest the administration building. The sleeve and conduit work, did that fit into the contingency for connecting that with a potential knockdown or whatever might happen to that administration building that I saw in a previous presentation?
Or
hopefully
we're not quite that manipulative, but let me tell you what it is. What that is actually for, it's to support the group, the proposed mall improvements. So specifically, they have talked about a fountain on Mall C. They've talked about a concession area on Mall C, and there's some improvements on Mall C that in order to put in the piping and to put in the electrical work, it would support that. There is nothing that we are doing that would preclude, to get to your point, the possible future development of the administration building site. This work we're talking about, it doesn't affect it one way or the other.
But I thought we were going to do some things in the contingency to enhance the ability to take care of a potential contingency to connect to that.
What we did in the original design is we've in effect already have done that. What we have done in the original design is we avoided design decisions that would impact on connectivity. In other words, the way the Medical Mart and the Convention Center are designed right now, if the county administration building, you may recall we showed you some diagrams of this, if there was an alternate use for that site, by way of example, if it was a structure that included some parking, or if it was a structure that included extension of exhibit halls, or you could think of other things, you could think of office, you could think of hotel. The current building is designed so that there are natural places where you can enter, exit, and make use of the expansion space. So what we did was we made sure that there were no impediments to expansion. We have not yet put any made specific design decisions yet, because that it all depends on who the ultimate, what the ultimate use might be. But there's no impediments to expansion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilman Greenspan.
When will the malls be ready for the exterior work that this planning group's supposed to be planning for?
That's a good question, and let me tell you one of the alternates that we are considering right now. We are considering an alternate where much of the real sophisticated work happens on Mall C, because that's where a fountain would be, that's where this vending an area would be, which could be a concession area, a public restroom area. And we're actually considering alternatives right now that would permit us to turn Mall C over, literally at the end of this year. In other words, we would, because we've already placed the roof on the structure north of Lakeside, and we would be in a position where we could get that to the city, the Plan Commission very, very early. So they could actually start that work if they have been able to go out, take their design, find their funding source. So we actually think that we can accommodate a very early turnover of the most critical area, which is Mall C. Mall B would be a different story. We're going to have to hold on to Mall B, longer to get all that work done. But the critical area, which is Mall C, we may be able to turn it over earlier than has ever been suggested before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My only comment about that fountain that I keep hearing about is it would make sense to try to make that generated with solar or some different kind of energy source than electricity. That's just my comment, and I keep saying something about it every time I'm here. So.
And we'll get you an interview with the Group Plan Commission.
That would be great.
I'm serious. They are making those determinations.
I understand.
But I think it's an important point that you should talk. We should talk about
something we're going to be looking at a futuristic way to design this for the public. Okay. So thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Okay, so we're going to end and conclude our work session now. Does anyone have miscellaneous business? Any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We're going to adjourn and take 5 minutes in between this meeting and the next.